Good evening, I'm Ces Orenia Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Sean Yao.
The big stories tonight. Oil companies are not implementing this week's big-time fuel price hike in one fell swoop. The adjustment will be spread over a few days as if to ease the pain a little bit. It's also uncertain if we've seen the last of hefty oil price hikes as the war in the Middle East rages on.
Now, the whole world is definitely watching and is nervously waiting on how the Israel and Iran conflict will play out as the United States now enters the picture. Already, tensions in the Gulf have prompted security alerts, disrupted travel, and even kicked off repatriation efforts globally.
And through her lawyers, Vice President Sara Duterte beats today's deadline to respond to summons from the impeachment court. In essence and in reiteration, Duterte wants her ouster trial dismissed even before it begins.
May utang na loob tayo dahil hindi biglaan, pero isinsanumbitay ka pa rin.
We begin with a fuel price hike set for tomorrow, June 24. Petroleum companies have agreed to stave off the almost 5 peso increase in petroleum products and implement it in tranches. But it will still be a full hike this week. In the meeting with the Department of Energy, oil firms decided to make a go of the first half of the price hike Tuesday. Gasoline will be adjusted by 1 peso and 75 centavos per liter, diesel at 2 pesos and 60 centavos per liter, and kerosene at 2 pesos and 40 centavos per liter. Then on Thursday, June 26, the other half of the increase for the said fuels will kick in. Earlier estimates pegged the hikes at nearly 4 pesos for gasoline and almost 5 pesos for diesel. As you know, diesel fuels most of our public utility vehicles, while kerosene is used for lighting and cooking in urban, poor, and rural areas. This is why transport groups still criticize the staggered increase and again pushed for the removal of the fuel excise tax as a better solution. They're also against a fare hike, as this could burden the riding public.
Parang ang gusto nga palabasin, may utang na loob tayo dahil hindi biglaan. Ang isinsya nun, parang bibitayin ka ng January, gawin nating Marso para hindi bigla, pero isinsanumbitay ka pa rin.
To help the transport sector, President Marcos has ordered the release of fuel subsidies. This is cover for PUV operators and drivers, including tricycles and delivery riders. But some drivers have claimed the aid does not reach them since only consolidated operators are entitled to subsidies.
Meantime, there are fears of more fuel price spikes. That's as the oil-rich Middle East watches the Israel and Iran conflict that now has the United States in the picture. Over the weekend, the U.S. claimed to have obliterated 3 Iranian nuclear sites. But most world leaders are calling for restraint. The Philippines, through the Foreign Affairs Department, urges concerned parties to take the path of diplomacy to avoid further escalation of the crisis now on its second week. It also assures that all Filipino nationals caught in the conflict will get assistance and protection. Over at the UN Security Council emergency meeting, Russia, China, and Pakistan are proposing to adopt a resolution calling for the immediate and unconditional ceasefire in the Middle East. The U.S. is expected to veto the resolution. UN Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez says U.S. airstrikes against Iran marked a perilous turn in the conflict-ridden Gulf area.
We must act immediately and decisively to halt the fighting and return to serious, sustained negotiations on the Iran nuclear program. We need a credible, comprehensive, and verifiable solution, one that restores trust, including with full access to inspectors of the IAEA as the United Nations technical authority in this field.
Israel and much of the West backed U.S. President Donald Trump's order for B-2 stealth bombers to drop 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs in 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. But others, such as China, Russia, and the Gulf states, condemned the attack for being irresponsible and a violation of international law. Meantime, in his weekly prayer, Pope Leo XIV appealed to the international community to stop the war before it becomes an irreparable abyss. More than ever, the pontiff said humanity cries out and pleads for peace. For its part, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security warns of a heightened threat environment in America due to the conflict. Pro-Iranian hacker activists or hacktivists are likely to engage in low-level cyber attacks, while violent extremism is possible if the Iranian regime calls for retaliation. Gulf states are also on high alert, with leaders from the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia discussing the implications of the airstrikes on international and regional security. All of them just hosted Trump last month for a tour of the Middle East.
And along with the Israel-Iran conflict, the world is closely monitoring a body of water called the Strait of Hormuz. Around 20% of the world's oil supply passes through there, and its closure will have a significant effect on supply and prices. How ready is the Philippines if this happens? And joining us tonight is Department of Energy Acting Secretary Sharon Garin. Good evening, Secretary, and welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening.
Well, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is something that is not going to happen, right? What is your assessment?
Well, historically, it's never happened, because it's also in the interest of the other countries to be able to sell their products, and that's one of the main gateways to transport it. So it's never happened, and historically we've checked it, and hindi po nangyayari to ever.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, we're bracing for the price hike this week, which will come in 2 tranches, but this won't be the last that we'll be seeing of an increase in the prices of oil products, right?
The prices are out of our control. It's not DOE that says what the price will be, nor the president. It is the international market.
Right.
So, unfortunately, we're very dependent on imports on oil, on gas and diesel. But the marching orders of the president is, as much as possible, we protect the Filipino people from the impact. So that's why he has ordered DOE, DOTR, and all the other agencies for us to at least parang walang economic shock in a sense that there will be an abrupt increase on the prices.
Mm-hmm. Is the DOE, will you encourage oil companies to increase buffer stock of petroleum products to somehow stave off the uncertainty in oil supply globally?
Right. We have 2 issues here. Dalawang issue yan yung the result of this conflict. You have the supply issue and the price issue.
Yeah.
Price difficult to manage, but the president has orders for all agencies to make sure that the impact is not as much on our people, especially yung sumasakay sa mga public utility vehicles. On the supply side, our rules require these companies to have at least 15 days of buffer reserves. We have checked. We check it every day, and as per average, they exceed the required 15 days. They actually have like 28 days of reserves. So meron tayong inventory as of today, and some companies comply more than they should. They are required, and some companies that have issues for permitting or whatever is the issue, as long as it's allowed. Kung procedural lang, we're actually assisting them in finishing all the requirements so that they could comply with the 15 days or at least have 1 month supply.
Yeah. You don't see the need to increase that further? You don't see the need to somehow add more days?
it is ideal that they have more because we don't know when the conflict will stop. No, but this is also money for our own companies. They're the ones paying for that, and that's also financials din nila yan. So it's difficult to ask for more buffer stock kasi 15 lang ngayong required, and that I guess the 15 days has some limitations na yan. But fortunately, the companies have 30 days of stock. So I think to ask them for more, we can appeal to them, but per regulation, we have to study that again because there might be limitations on the oil companies also.
Secretary Sharon, a lot of people are wondering bakit tumama yung 5 peso hike this week. Kung advance naman tayo nag-order ng oil, we understand this oil that we're getting now, it's from like 8 months ago or something like that. Maybe you can just tell us, parang saan ba nagkakaroon ng price hike ngayon kahit na dati pa in-order itong oil?
Actually, before I was in DOE, I was wondering about that because, di ba, binili mo na no? But the way oil companies work is yung how much will they replace the stock? That's how it's been always. So once you finish this, you have to replace it with whatever is the price. So that's how they do it, and that's the practice of the industry. So kaya hindi siya yung binili na dati, but every time they replace it, they have to pay for it. It's not like they have a stock for a year or for they go month to month, but the adjustments, the price that they charge now is what will be the replacement of what they sell today.
All right, and when still keeping on the finance part of it all, we know that in Congress you were pushing for the tax reform, and now ang suggestion ng transport groups ay suspend yung excise tax on fuels instead, which is 6 pesos per liter. Is that even remotely possible?
It's in the law, Sean. No? It's in the law that there is excise tax or even VAT and value-added tax on our fuel. So we cannot, DOE by itself cannot say we suspend the taxes. But on the other side, though, you have to remember also this is about 400 billion pesos a year that also fund many of our projects, basic services of the government. So it's a balance also. If we don't have that, how many bridges, roads, school buildings are constructed out of those collections of the government? So medyo mahirap din isakripisyo yung that kind of earnings of the government kasi baka magreklamo naman yung ibang sector on the yung kulang na serbisyo sa kanilang sector.
Well, Secretary, we do know that the Philippines is heavily reliant on oil imports. But right now, is there a way for us, or are there any active efforts to diversify suppliers just in case traditional routes such as the Strait of Hormuz gets compromised?
Right. It's long term. Yes, there are solutions, but it's long term. It cannot be done today or tomorrow or next week. It will take us years. One of the shorter probably is to push. We've been trying to push for the electric vehicles. Kasi electric vehicles are, ang cost ng electric vehicles like if it's like gas, no? Kung fuel siya, 5 pesos per kilometer yan. But if it's electric vehicles, it's 1 peso and 71 centavos per kilometer. So, and you're not affected by the variance whenever there's something happens in the Middle East or any part of the globe. Kasi our electric prices are regulated. So, electric vehicles is one good solution. And another one is there is one is the expansion of Malampaya or the extension of Malampaya. They're drilling now. Actually, 3 sites ang drill nila. And then we have about 8 contracts for gas or oil exploration. So those are things that would give us energy security. Diba? Hindi ka na mag-i-import, the impact would be less maybe we cannot supply all of our fuel needs, pero at least kung meron tayong energy security at a certain level, then impact would not be as big.
And in terms of subsidies, Secretary, I understand the DOE has already issued a certification to the DOTR to issue subsidies for the transport sector. Gaano kalaki po? How much are we talking about? And how soon can these fuel subsidies be rolled out?
Ito yung maganda kasi wala pa ngang the escalation is still, we're still in the first steps, but the president already ordered make sure that the riding public are not become vulnerable to this, So we're trying to find solutions as ordered by the president na to protect yung mga gumagamit ng public utility vehicles most especially. So other than first one is the staggering of the increase kasi ma-prepare mo na eh. No? Yes, the increase ultimately will be the same, 4 pesos. Pero at least if you know that it will increase on a certain day, the day before, you can already buy the cheaper one. And slowly lang, hindi siya malaking impact. The second is the subsidies. The subsidies will be distributed by the Department of Transportation and for PUVs, and also by Department of Agriculture for our farmers and fisher folks. So there's inunahan na kasi ng presidente ang orders niya to the departments na to make sure that the impact is not as high, no? So actually we've been having conferences now with the other departments, and in fact we're also scheduled tomorrow to refine what's the plan. Pero there's a 2.5 billion funding under GAA for ayuda. So hopefully we before it kicks in pa nga na it's inflationary na yung level ng fuel, the departments are responding to the call of the president to protect the riding public.
So possible, Secretary, na kahit before tumama ng $80 per barrel yung presyo ng oil, may roll out na yung subsidies?
It is possible, and I think that's already being considered. Kasi if you remember correctly, early on this year, there was already $80 per barrel na eh. Parang mga January or February, So it's been triggered already. So ngayon, we're just refining what's the program, how much each of the recipients will receive, and who are the recipients. So yun lang yung inaayos ngayon. But I think the OTR, I just spoke to Secretary Vince, and they're ready once the logistics are there now.
So when can we expect this? Next week?
I cannot commit to that sense because that's not my department. But I think they're already prepared na. I think anytime they're prepared na, especially when there's already expectation of further increase.
And this 2.5 billion that you mentioned, does that cover even the farmers, or is that just for the transport sector?
I think under the DOTR's 2.5 billion and under DA, if I'm not mistaken, about 600 million.
Okay.
So separate.
Separate.
Okay. Secretary, syempre may tama talaga sa mga nagda-drive, sa mga sumasakay na sasakyan. Pero yung power generating sector natin, it's also heavily reliant on diesel. Do you see any impacts in that sector?
That will have an impact, certainly. But most of our users for diesel kasi especially yung mga islands natin, I think yun na, because konti lang yung demand, so it's more diesel or gensets ang nagpo-provide ng electricity natin. Unlike here in Luzon, kasi we have natural gas, we have coal, we have renewable. So, for example, may impact yan kasi whatever is the cost of fuel, yun yung increase, no? But there are solutions also to that. Like, for example, the president went to Siquijor the other week, and that was not just because of the price increase, but on the stability of electricity in the island. So there are solutions making it more accessible. So now we're trying to find more supply for Siquijor, as well as more renewable energy, and,
Right.
and also we're entering to a MOA with the province of Siquijor in order for yung demand side management. Ibig sabihin how to conserve, lessen your use of electricity, and also to use renewable energy in their rooftops. So there are solutions, but it's not immediate.
But
Yeah.
what happened there, no? Since you brought it up, I was going to go towards Siquijor, but inunahan niyo ako. So ano ba nangyari doon? Did you finally get to the root of the problem with the supplier and the distributor?
And tama po ba, Secretary, tourism was the key driver on why there was a problem with the demand in Siquijor?
It's not the tourism. We have the projections of what will be the demand of Siquijor over the next few months or years. Talagang mag-i-increase siya. It's a very progressive in terms of tourism, not just tourism but also industry. So ang problema talaga, we had a problem with the supply side, no? Ibig sabihin yung generation company. Kasi nasisira palagi ang yung gensets nila. So up to a point na halos 10 hours a day ang blackouts doon. So that's not good because naman Siquijor is getting more and more popular, and then there are more tourists. So they have the momentum already. Nakakasira talaga ng tourism ng Siquijor and negosyo ng Siquijor. So we found the root cause. It's the supply side. So we're fixing that. We already all the gensets out of all the gensets, I think there are 9 plus 2 pa yata, so there's 11.
So it's the
there's
government that's coming to the rescue of this private company. Will you rescind the contract of that generation company?
Well, let's fix the problem first before we go to the legal side. Kasi nakikita lang yan eh. If you rescind the contract, who will supply the power, di ba? So those are things that we're trying to fix also. Have more supply, have more option. Pero it's good kasi when the president went there, we had a succession of meetings, and we already have like a calendar of all the deliverables that we have, all stakeholders actually. Ayusin ng SIPCOR yung mga genset nila, kailan ayusin nila yung connection ng mga gensets nila. Even the electric co-op has also deliverables, even DOE, ERC. So medyo nakaschedule na siya. So by that, what was the concern of the president is that yes, we should fix this now, but make sure that come 2026, the long-term solution should be in place already. So that's what we are following, because he wants to make sure that hindi lang to band-aid solution para sa mga taga-Siquijor. So it should be a long. So we're addressing that. We're fixing the contracts, as you mentioned, not canceling it, but we're fixing
May
contracts.
penalties for sure, dapat, diba?
The penalties is not the regulator of the penalties is actually ERC. So though there are also parallel activities with ERC also. They're doing their own investigation, their show cause orders and all that. But on the other hand, I don't think it is the priority of the president to go after the ones at fault. What he wants first is stabilize muna yung electricity para it can go on in Siquijor muna.
Right. So, Secretary, this really should hasten the march towards increased renewable energy. How close are you to the target? By 2030, dapat 35%?
Yes, ma'am. By 2030, 35%. I think we will reach that. DOE is quite confident. In fact, we are
Pa sana.
number 2 in the world in investment attractiveness as when it comes to, that's a Bloomberg study, that we're number 2 in the world in attractiveness for investments in renewable. In fact, we're on track. Tapos we have actually the president actually inaugurated the biggest solar farm, 3,500. That's really a huge jump for us. Kasi ito yung pinakamalaki. I'm not sure if in the world, but at least in the area of Southeast Asia, I think that's the biggest. So we're on track on renewables. Hopefully the technology also improves. Kasi marami din marami din kailangan yan to stabilize it, like the batteries, all that, no? So even the grid. So but as to installed capacity, I think we will be able to reach that.
Last question for me, Sec Guerin. How close are we to 100% rural electrification, which I believe, based on the roadmap, should be by 2032, way past your term. But how many percent are we at the moment, would you say?
We're always high naman, Sean, but our population rate is also fast, ano? So the more people, the more houses. So kahit sabihin mo na we cannot at this pace right now. We're trying to reach the 100, but it's not possible as of now. But as per instructions of the president, we are pushing for 100%. So marami na yung studies on how much we will need every year. So we've actually calculated all the funding that we need. It's quite high, ano? Pero there are other options naman, like deploying renewable energy. Kasi for example, if you've seen the news, NEA and DepEd had a joint project of putting solar panels in yung pinakamalayong mga schools. Yes. And they've done that. They've added even new TVs and new Starlink connection and all that. So possible naman siya as long as all agencies come together as instructed by the president, and also there's also participation of the private. Kaya maganda ngayon. I just want to add. Kaya maganda ngayon yung the effect of this oil price hike.
It's making us look at other options.
Yeah.
Hastening.
And also says, di ba yung president announced yesterday, like a couple of days lang that he's called for the oil companies to stagger the increase. And today we had a meeting with all the oil companies in the morning. 10 o'clock, no? Pagkahapon nag-announce na sila ng staggering nila. So, they responded well, and our next meetings with them is kung pwede nilang ma-expand or ma-extend or increase all their promos or discounts. Kasi like many of these companies already have like PUV lanes, PUV discounts, and we're asking them out of their patriotic sentiment na matulungan yung bayan natin, because we don't regulate the oil companies. We're appealing to them because the law deregulated oil. So now we're asking them for their own contribution to our country, and they've responded naman. The staggering they've announced today, and hopefully within the next few days they will have more promotions, especially for PUVs, para hindi na tayo mag-increase ng fare, which is what I think the president really wants.
All right, with that, Secretary, we discussed breaking news and the big picture pa. Thank you so much for talking to us here in The Big Story. That was Department of Energy Acting Secretary Sharon Garin.
We're just going to take a quick break, but coming up, the COMELEC is asking the Supreme Court for more clarity after the High Tribunal ruled that second placers cannot assume posts of disqualified election winners. That and more stories when The Big Story returns. Keep it here on One News.
You're watching the big story here on One News. The conflict between Israel and Iran enters the second week, and what could be a more dangerous phase, rather, that's as a third party joins in. Here's the story.
It's been several hours since the United States launched an unprecedented attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran. The atomic areas cover Isfahan and the underground facilities at Natanz and Fordow. Fordow is dug deeply under a mountainside, and it's long been believed that America would need to use specialized bunker-busting bombs to destroy the facility.
A stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. The strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
Iran has acknowledged the U.S. strikes, but there is no report yet of how much damage has been done. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned Tehran against retaliation, either by more bombings or by making good on its threat to choke off global oil supply. Iranian officials all the way up to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei have said any U.S. attack in the Gulf region would draw an immediate, more intense response. The jury is also still out on how the wider Middle East will respond. Tehran's parliament is likewise backing a measure to close the Strait of Hormuz, a critical waterway through which nearly 25% of global oil shipments pass. The decision is still awaiting final approval from the Supreme National Security Council. This part of the Middle Eastern region has been on edge since the Israel-Hamas war started back in 2023. And now, it looks like everything has just escalated, triggered by Tel Aviv launching strikes on Tehran's nuclear facilities on June 13. And the war rages on.
Meantime, the Department of Foreign Affairs has raised Alert Level 3 in Israel and Iran, prompting repatriation, though still voluntary, of Filipinos there. According to Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Ed De Vega, 26 Filipinos who evacuated from Israel are set to arrive tomorrow morning, June 24, from Amman, Jordan. On Friday, June 27, 8 Filipinos from Iran will also be received via the same route. De Vega explained that it took some time to evacuate because they had to renew passports to get transit visas through Jordan for Israel and through Turkmenistan for Iran. More than 200 Filipinos have also requested repatriation since the Israel-Iran war erupted. And as to why evacuations are still voluntary despite the Middle East conflict, this is what Yusek De Vega had to say.
Patayan sa advice ng local ambassadors natin, no, sa Tel Aviv at sa Tehran. Ang alert level 4 or mandatory repatriation is rarely used. Kailangan may total break on failed state na, gera na talaga. Lagi tayong handa for anything. We've done it before. Isang advantage ngayon natin, walang danger na so far na lumawak ito at mag-spread sa buong Middle East. Kung hindi, World War III na yan. Bakit po? Parang ang dating, except for Qatar, which made a statement, no? Yung mga ibang bansa, yung mga Arab countries beside it, most of whom don't have diplomatic relations with Israel or have issues with Iran. Because of that, countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, where we have 1 million or almost 1 million, Saudi lagpas 1 million na Filipinos, they're relatively safe.
And for those who choose to remain in Israel despite the violence there, it is a daily struggle every time the siren sounds when it is time to hide. On top of that, some of our kababayans complained of their homes being looted after they leave for the bomb shelters. One Filipina said even her bed was stolen, but she's still thankful that she and her housemates are still alive.
Dahil pagka marinig mo talagang iba, ang nasa isip mo lagi, nako, may namatay na naman. At totoo po, sunod-sunod, lalo kung sumasapit na po ang gabi, ay kami nangangamba na.
And now let's discuss this further with Professor Richard Haydarian, our resident geopolitical analyst. Good evening to you, Richard.
Good evening,
Welcome
yes.
to the big story. Is diplomacy still alive? Is it an option?
Well, I mean, it makes me remember when Churchill said, like, you know, there are situations like, for instance, dealing with Russia. He said it's like a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. So what we are in right now is an uncharted territory within an uncharted territory within an uncharted territory. Let's not forget, just 2 weeks ago, people were looking forward to the 6th round of talks, nuclear talks between the United States and U.S. Some reports suggest a framework agreement was on the table, meaning maybe Iran will freeze
You
some
mean
of
the Iran and the U.S.?
Yes, I'm talking about the Steve Witkoff, the special representative for Donald Trump, and the Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi. There was an expectation that the 6th round would move forward, and 2 days before, suddenly you have this attack. One side says it's for self-defense, the other side says it's an unprovoked. The reality is that in itself was a big shock. And then you have Donald Trump. Initially, the Trump administration distances itself, says this is unilateral, we have nothing to do with it. They took out their troops and forces from the area to make sure they don't get involved. And then a few days later, Donald Trump basically owns it, co-owns it. And next thing you know, he says, okay, I'll give this another ultimatum of 2 weeks more for diplomacy. And then 2 days in, you have this attack. As we speak, we still don't know exactly what that attack achieved. Some would say the impact is decisive. I was just looking at the updates by the IEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. It may suggest that there might be some impact. There are others who are saying this is just for the gram, that maybe it made a lot of splash, but maybe not. And then there are others saying that actually something else that could have happened here is that maybe there was some sort of signaling. So maybe the Iranians had actually took out already the highly enriched uranium. And now, and I think Pete Hegseth, the chief of Pentagon, I think he admitted a while ago that they now cannot really track what's going on. So actually, we are moving into a very dangerous situation because on one hand, it is very possible that Iran may not officially withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but de facto be in a gray zone, whereby you don't know what's happening to that enriched uranium. And then the other one is, as we speak, I think everyone is rushing to get their tanks full because the price is going to go up, but that's even without the worst-case scenario. And the worst-case scenario is that what if there is a military action or mining of the Hormuz Strait, which is a very narrow strait, which more or less Iran is a dominant power.
Iran has done that before.
This is during the Iran-Iraq war.
They put aqua mines under.
Yes, and you had the tanker wars and horrible situation. U.S. got involved military back in the day, so there's a fear we might go in that direction. We have not yet, because there is still room for the escalation, right?
Yes, how?
So one
how
thing
can
is,
we bring these people to the table and talk?
well, I think for the Iranians, they don't want to get into a two-front war. As we speak, there's tit for tat between Tel Aviv and Tehran. Civilian casualties going up. It's a very depressing situation. At the same time, the Iranians, I don't think they want to pick a two-front war, including with a superpower like the United States. So there could be a calibrated escalation whereby Iran will have a response. But from what I understand, the Americans withdraw a lot of troops anyway from a lot of bases in the area as a precautionary measure. So could there be a calibrated symbolic response to make sure this doesn't get out of control, especially if the Iranians were able to take out already highly enriched uranium?
But Richard,
if they strike hard back and there's high casualty on the American side, then we're looking at the multi-front war. Now, China and Russia, I don't think World War III is going to happen anytime soon, but China and Russia may not directly come to Iran's aid, but if this becomes a protracted conflict like the Ukraine conflict, they have an interest to bog down America via Iran, the same way that the NATO supports Ukraine against, again, these are very different situations from a moral international law standpoint, but from a real politics standpoint, if you look at it in the short run, everyone could be a loser, including us, because of the oil prices.
And our OFWs will be
as the USEC mentioned, we're really worried that this... And remember, like Iran also has another nuclear power plant. This is a civilian nuclear power plant in Bushehr, in the south of the country. There are fears that if that gets targeted, it could create a Chernobyl-style radioactive situation. Then it's really, forget about World War III, it's going to be a radioactive, literal situation in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia.
But who will do that?
And
so
can
far,
we
there's
still-
no attack, because that's a purely civilian plant, and the Russian scientists there. So the stakes are much higher. So when people, I don't know, President Trump, I think, claimed that the program has been obliterated. Let's not forget there are many other facilities. Some we may not know about. Iran is one of the most mountainous countries on earth. And Iran has thousands of scientists. This is a country with, what, 4th, 5th highest IQ in the world. So I don't think anyone can eliminate the nuclear program. But the hope here is that maybe eventually at least the Americans and the Iranians sit down and negotiate something via intermediaries. The Turks are helping, the Saudis are helping. 21 countries, including all regional powers, came up with a statement the other week saying there's going to be no winner in this.
But
The
do you
whole
really
region will
think,
be-
though, that we can still walk it back from where we are currently? Because they've already said words, right, that they want to, take out or assassinate the Ayatollah. These are, I don't know how Iran's going to take that.
Well, from my understanding is all sides, these are systematic states, meaning we're not talking about fight between militia forces that, you decapitate the leadership and it's over. Look at Iran, for instance. It reconstituted its forces quite quickly, even though despite the tactical success of the other side initially. So you're talking about a 90 million strong country. So I think they have all contingencies in place to make sure the state institutions stay in place. Every side has a contingency in this.
They're talking about regime change even.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's not in interest of all regional states, right? I mean, look at when we had civil war in Afghanistan, Pakistan suffered, all regional states suffered. When Iraq, there was a civil war, Syria, the same thing. I imagine Iran is 4 times larger than Iraq's population back in 2003.
Can we talk about how China can be drawn into the conflict, being the #1 buyer of
Iranian
oil?
Well, I mean, obviously the Chinese are very worried.
And sorry, which means also that it's not in Iran's interest to sabotage the Strait of Hormuz, right?
Yes, so as we speak, for instance, there are Chinese surveillance ships in the area. Some reports suggest that maybe as we speak, China is already helping Iran in terms of surveillance. Some were saying maybe Iran is already using Beidou, the GPS system of China. We don't know. China has so far condemned all of these attacks as violation of international law. But at the same time, I think they're also hoping that there'll be a diplomatic de-escalation. Now, that's what I'm saying. Well, the last time we saw, remember the Houthis in Yemen, who were seen as an ally of Iran, when they targeted shipping lanes, China was also affected at some point. Now, I don't know if over time there was a negotiation. I think China understands that if it becomes a desperate situation, it's going to be really out of their control, because they don't control also Iran, right? The same way Russia doesn't control Iran. But it's just interesting, as we speak, Vladimir Putin, who oversaw invasion of Ukraine in violation of international law, is positioning himself as a mediator and potential peacemaker. This is the crazy situation we're finding ourselves in. As we speak, China could lose in the short run because they rely on Iranian oil, and of course, if the Hormuz Strait is closed down. But I think over the long run, this could benefit China if this gets out of control, because that means Russia is bogged down in Ukraine, U.S. is bogged down in the Middle East, and China will have a more or less free reign here. That's why I think if you're Filipino, it's your interest not only to see our folks are protected, not only to see our gas prices doesn't get out of control, not only to make sure more civilians are not going to suffer, but a U.S. that is bogged down in a bigger war even in the Middle East, while Russia is also bogged down. That means China will be the inevitable, like a superpower with a free reign. And as we speak, actually, China is flipping the script, right? Suddenly, they're now positioning themselves. They say, obviously, we don't agree as Filipinos because we're being bullied in West Philippines. But their rhetoric is, look at us. Have we invaded any country?
Invaded.
How many countries we have invaded in the last 60 years? Of course, we can talk about the Vietnam border war, etc. But they say, look at other countries. They have disagreements. They go and strike each other's facilities, right? So suddenly now China is looking like the pacifist response. Again, this is all propaganda and positioning. But my fear is that as a Filipino, it will be harder for us to get sympathy of other ASEAN countries on the West Philippine Sea issue when, in fact, you go to Malaysia and Indonesia, everyone is paying attention to what's happening in the Middle East.
Because we're pro-America? Is that why?
Yeah, well, did we condemn any of America's? I don't think so, right? And there's this sense that, this is no longer about international law, it's tribalism, right? If our guy did this, we'll support that guy. So I think in that situation, China has a natural advantage, right? Because they can offer economic investments, they can offer technology.
But Richard, that's my question. Should the Philippines take a position here? We do know the U.S. is our longtime ally. We also have special ties with Israel. But you have nations condemning it. There are also others who support it. For our own national and foreign interests, should we take a side?
Well, maybe for the first time in a long time, I'll agree with Sara Duterte, who for the first time in 3 years made a statement on West Philippines.
Yes, actually.
Something along the lines, like ngayon lang siya nag-statement, something along the lines of somewhere in the gitna dapat ang Pilipinas, because we have to protect our OFWs, right? And we don't want to be caught in the crossfire. But the devil is in the details, right? What does sa gitna mean? And that doesn't also mean that medyo magtulog-tulugan tayo sa West Philippine Sea. That's why I said, China actually, it has an interest in seeing other superpowers bogged down somewhere else. Remember, it's not like U.S. has infinite resources. In fact, as we speak, one of the biggest critics of Trump's intervention are MAGA people. Make America Great Again people. And
Because
what?
because
that's what he
he
promised.
promised
No
not
war,
to-
but why? Because they're saying our real competition is China, right? Our real interest is to remain the superpower in the most important region in the world. That's our region, right? And our real interest is to avoid another quagmire.
Well, now
that
in a
will-
way, they're somehow abdicating to China in that regard, because China has made inroads in making friends in Africa, Latin
Absolutely,
America,
Here in the ASEAN.
The Latin America and Africa, we have seen that for
and
a
then
long
US
time.
aid, wala na.
Wala nang US. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you are an American diplomat right now, if you're a US ally who wants to push a certain vision in our part of the world, East Asia and the Pacific, you're gonna have a much harder time
Tayo
right
na
now.
lang atang kaibigan nila.
US? Well,
Si Netanyahu.
well, actually, you know, the lesson we should learn from all of the U.S. allies who are in the middle of conflict right now is, have you noticed they're getting billions of dollars of aid? In fact, Ukraine is not even a U.S. treaty ally, and how they got $60 billion in aid.
Tapos
How
ang
much are
mga
we getting?
tayo, mga bulok na, ay, hindi naman.
I mean, hindi naman.
mga
Medyo we
medyo
went-
pinaglumaan na, hindi naman bulok.
Let's just say it's nowhere close to what Ukraine or top U.S. allies in the Middle East are getting. So I think the lesson for the Philippines is, you know, a smart ally makes the most out of its alliance. And last time I checked, we are in the most important region of the world, with all due respect to those traditional
Pero tama
theaters.
kayo,
where
yung
the
sabi ni
conflict
Sara Duterte is, yung relationship natin with China is not limited to yung issue natin sa West Philippine
Yes.
Sea, nung sinabi niya. It goes beyond that, di ba?
Tama naman.
And her dad, of course, famously kind of pivoted towards China. Do you think this could actually be something that Sarah could campaign on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if things get really crazy, God forbid, right? They can say, not only we don't want to be next Ukraine, we don't want to be the next, I don't know, ex-US ally in My point here is, if you look at actually these conflicts, the lesson is very clear. You negotiate for peace when you're in a relative position of strength, right? Whatever country you are. So actually, where I disagree with Sara Duterte is like, yes, tama, dapat play, di naman play safe, but play smart and hedge, but let's pursue peace with China, but not when we have such a weak military or such a divided country. Let's deal with China when we're a much more unified country, not uniteam level, but and a stronger military.
That's a long way off militarily.
Ukraine was a joke militarily in 2021, and that's why in 2022 it got invaded. Today, Ukraine is, by some experts estimate, the most seasoned and effective armed forces in terms of Marines, but also drone power. So in 3 years, Ukraine went from fourth world to a drone superpower. Look at the operations they undertook in Russia, the spiderwebs operation. So what I'm saying is that you don't need war to accelerate. But we can see that there could be war, or we could be invaded, or something crazy could happen if we don't step up. Because the Taiwanese are stepping up, the Japanese are stepping up, even the Aussies, who are not on the front line, are stepping up by going for AUKUS submarines. So I am with Sarah on the general positioning, strategy, diplomacy, but I am with President BBM and others in terms of strengthening the foundations of our power by leveraging our alliances. And that's why foreign policy is difficult, because you have to always adjust to shifting ground. The ground is shifting as we speak.
Oh, we went back na to the country and
Galing.
forgot the conflict in the Middle
No,
East.
because
But-
they're all related,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. That's
Because
true.
China, US, Russia, they're all involved in every major region, and we are the most important region, and we're at the front line. So that's why this is not only the usual concern we have dun sa gitnang silangan, dapat titignan din natin ang epekto nito dun sa calculus ng China, sa ating karagatan, sa ating backyard.
Okay, maraming salamat sa'yo.
Thank you. I mean, you introduced me as a geopolitical analyst, so that's why I gave you the full...
It's but right. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Professor Richard Haydarian,
Thank you so much.
our resident geopolitical analyst.
Okay, in other news, the Supreme Court has officially scrapped the, quote, second placer rule for having no legal basis. This refers to the runner-up in an election assuming office if the winning candidate is later on disqualified. The SC said only the local government code succession rule applies when a permanent vacancy occurs due to disqualification. This decision stemmed from a petition by Sultan Kudarat Governor Datu Pax Ali Mangudadatu against Sharifa Akil Mangudadatu, his opponent during the 2022 elections. The High Court decided to unseat Ali as governor effective today due to residency issues. Ali had refuted that as his vice governor, Raden Sakalaran should take the vacant post, not Sharifa, who was a second placer in the gubernatorial polls 3 years ago.
For its part, the Commission on Elections says it will appeal the SC's ruling as it might affect decisions recently made by the poll body. COMELEC also wants to know if the ruling covers national posts. COMELEC is set to proclaim the winners of the 2025 elections on June 30.
Gusto namin po ng guidance dahil gusto namin kung talagang final at yun na po abandon na yung doktrina, kakailanganin po namin mag-amend ng rules po namin ng Commission on Election upang yung mga rules po namin o procedure ay maitugma namin doon sa nailabas na desisyon ng Korte Suprema. Yung po bang desisyon na yun after can retroact o ang desisyon can only be prospective. Napaka-importante po niyan kasi po once na naproklama na ng COMELEC, nawawalan po kami ng jurisdiction. So ibig sabihin, kung may naproklama na po kami dahil siya ay second placer, ibig sabihin ba may lumabas na desisyon na ito, baliwala ba yung proklamasyon na ginawa sa kanya?
Meanwhile, the poll body says it is ready to answer PDP Laban's petition to conduct a manual recount of this year's senatorial race results. COMELEC will no longer have jurisdiction over the matter when the national candidates have already taken their oath. If this happens, the mandate goes to the Senate Electoral Tribunal.
Time to pause for another quick break, but when we return, Vice President Sara Duterte responds to the summons issued by the impeachment court. She also resumes her criticism of her former running mate, President Bongbong Marcos. The details next. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back to the big story. Vice President Sara Duterte has submitted a reply to the summons issued to her by the Senate Impeachment Court. She maintains the complaint against her is unconstitutional. In her response, the Vice President said the impeachment complaint should be declared void as it supposedly violated the one-year bar rule of the 1987 Constitution. The 1987 Constitution states that no impeachment proceedings shall be initiated against the same official more than once within a period of 1 year. Duterte also said that, quote, there are no statements of ultimate facts in the fourth impeachment complaint, and it is nothing more than a scrap of paper. She also pleaded not guilty to the charges.
Both the impeachment court and the lower house received copies of Duterte's reply this afternoon, which will then be sent to presiding officer Francis Escudero and all senator judges. Meantime, House prosecutors maintain the fourth impeachment complaint did not violate the one-year ban. That's because the first three impeachment complaints did not leave the office of the House Secretary General, and the filing of new ouster charges only begins when it is forwarded to the Justice Committee. While her lawyers are trying to stop her impeachment trial here, the Vice President is drumming up support abroad for her detained father, former President Rodrigo Duterte. She is also not letting up on her tirades, calling President Bongbong Marcos a, quote, scammer. According to the VP, this is a fitting description of Marcos for failing to fulfill his campaign promises back in 2022. Sara also called the chief executive insecure for allowing the arrest for her father back in March.
The vice president is again skipping the chief executive's fourth State of the Nation address on July 28. She was also a no-show last year, branding herself the designated survivor in case something happens during the sauna. The vice president was in Australia over the weekend to attend a rally to free Digong, who is facing crimes against humanity charges before the International Criminal Court.
He has not followed through with any of his campaign promises. And budol in English is scam, no? Yeah. Well, we're not surprised. He has the hallmark of a scammer. I do not intend to attend the State of the Nation address of President Marcos since I don't think he will be providing anything substantial about our country, and it would be best to spend that time with the Filipino community.
Malacanang is not having any of Vice President Duterte's recent remarks. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro shot back at the Vice President point by point.
Budol? Talaga? Hindi ko alam kung sino ba ang budol. Hindi natin alam kung sino ba ang nambubudol. Sa panahon, sa nakikita po natin na pagtatrabaho ng Pangulo, sa pag-uutos sa amin na focus sa trabaho at hindi pamumulitika, sino ba talaga ang nambubudol? Wala po ako nadidinig sa Pangulo na siya po ay nanghinayang. Kung siya man po ay nakipag-team up sa Vice Presidente. Kung may nagsisisi man na sa kanya ay maka-team up siya, it's their loss, not the President's.
All right, and that's it for the big story this Monday evening. Thank you so much for watching.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
We'll be back here tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Have a good night, everyone.
Coming up next, though, we still have play-by-play with Andre Felix and Cheska Leton Calao. Finally, tapos na ba ang finals? Or what?
Yes! Last day today, Game 7, panalo OKC.
It was eventful.
Oh, pero yun nga, Tyrese Halliburton going down with an injury. More in our show later on. How was your weekend, ladies?
Rainy.
It was a rainy weekend. Yeah, it was a gloomy.
Madam Ses, nag-farm ka? Hindi.
Nag-farm, of course.
Yeah,
Umulan? Hindi naman.
Ay, hindi. Hindi umulan.
Nice.
Ikaw, Sean, kamusta ka naman? Kamusta ang ano?
Wala nga akong ginawa, natulog lang ako. Kaya parang, guys, bye.
Sounds like a weekend well spent.
Samantalang ako nagbubungkal ng lupa.
Si Boss Pawi, alam ko ginawa niya.
Ano ginawa ni Pawi?
Anong ginawa mo, Pawi?
Hindi, 10K. Nag-ano run.
Nag-marathon ka.
Hindi. Nag-host lang yan. Hindi tumakbo yan. Hindi tumakbo.
Balita ko may tatakbo daw.
Oo nga.
And it's not Pawi or
Ano?
me or Seth.
What's that?
70 days to go.
Kaya ba? Kaya?
Yes, kaya. Let's see.
Ayaw na niya.
We're rooting for you.
Thank you.
Kayanin mo.
Pero alam niyo ba, session, Lavi, kakasabi ko lang kay Chess, di ko masaka, busog eh. So, but thank you again to the ladies of the big story, to Ses, to Sean, and to Pauline. Tonight on our show, as they've mentioned, yes, Game 7 in the books, NBA Finals, and we got the Oklahoma City Thunder capping off their dominant season with an NBA title. Plus, Kevin Durant on the move as the Phoenix Suns trade him to the Houston Rockets.
What a way for him to find out, though. And we find out who made the cut for Alas Pilipinas women in the VTV Cup.
So stay tuned, volleyball fans.